my name is Lauren and today I'm going to be reacting to a TED Talk video. This TED Talk video is by Christopher McDougall and it's about whether or not humans were born to run. So I'm going to be looking at some of the main points that the speaker makes to support his argument that humans were born to run. So some of the points that I'm going to be analyzing are Christopher's use of examples from the past and from modern times. Let's take a look.
Case in point, a couple months ago, if you saw the New York City Marathon, I guarantee you saw something that no one has ever seen before. An Ethiopian woman named Deraartu Tulu turns up at the starting line. She's 37 years old. She hasn't won a marathon of any kind in 8 years, and a few months previously, she had almost died in childbirth. Deraartu Tulu was ready to hang it up and retire from the sport, but she decided she'd go for broke and try for one last big payday in the marquee event, the New York City Marathon. Except bad news for Deraartu Tulu, some other people had the same idea, including the Olympic gold medalist and Paula Radcliffe, who is a monster, the fastest woman marathoner in history by far. Only 10 minutes off the men's world record. Paula Radcliffe is essentially unbeatable. That's her competition. The gun goes off, and I mean, she's not even an underdog. She's like under the underdogs. But the underdog hangs tough. And 22 miles into a 26-mile race, there is Deraartu Tulu up there with the lead pack. Now, this is when something really bizarre happens. Paula Radcliffe, the one person who is sure to snatch the big paycheck out of Deraartu Tulu's underdog hands, suddenly grabs her leg and starts to fall back. So we all know what to do in this situation, right? You give her a quick crack in the teeth with your elbow, blaze for the finish line. Deraartu Tulu ruins the script. Instead of taking off, she falls back and she grabs Paula Radcliffe and says, come on, come with us, you can do it. So Paula Radcliffe, unfortunately, does it. She catches up with the lead pack and is pushing toward the finish line. But then she falls back again. And the second time, Deraartu Tulu grabs her and tries to pull her. And Paula Radcliffe at that point says, I'm done, go. So that's a fantastic story, and we all know how it ends. She loses the check, but she comes home with something bigger and more important. Except Deraartu Tulu ruins the script again. Instead of losing, she blazes past the lead pack and wins. Wins the New York City Marathon, goes home with a big fat check. It's a heartwarming story, but if you drill a little bit deeper, you've got to sort of wonder about what exactly was going on there. You know, when you have two outliers in one organism, it's not a coincidence. When you have someone who is more competitive and more compassionate than anybody else in the race, again, it's not a coincidence. You show me a creature.
Okay, so I just want to say that this speaker uses the example of the New York City Marathon as an example of something that everyone can relate to, because I think everyone knows about the New York City Marathon. Everyone knows that it's a big deal, and so that these women that are competing in it are able to show their competitiveness and showing that they have the ability to run these long distances, and that even though she was an underdog and she was able to come back and win the race. So I think this kind of the use of this opening example gives the speaker his ability to connect with the audience and give them something that they are able to relate to and give them something that they can feel to, and that can be seen as an example of pathos, and that he is kind of appealing to the audience's emotions, showing that this woman was an underdog, but she was still able to come back and win the race. And this again is kind of building up to his argument that people are born to run, and that this woman had faced adversity, but she's still out here, and that she was able to win the New York City Marathon. Next, the speaker brings up the point of the Tarahumara Indians, and these are kind of a group of people who lived a long time ago and today are still living the same lifestyle that they were, and talks about how they're able to run mega marathons. So let's look at what he has to say about that.
The thing remarkable about the Tarahumara is, deep in the old age, 70 and 80 years old, these guys aren't running marathons. They're running mega marathons. They're not doing 26 miles. They're doing 100, 150 miles at a time, and apparently without injury, without problems. The last thing that's remarkable about the Tarahumara is all the things that we're going to be talking about today, all the things that we're trying to come up using all of our technology and brain power to solve, things like heart disease and cholesterol and cancer and crime and warfare and violence and clinical depression, all this stuff, the Tarahumara don't know what you're talking about. They are free from all of these modern ailments.
Okay, so it kind of brings up the point that these Tarahumara Indians are able to run 100, 150 miles at a time without, they're not having any injuries, they're not having any problems, they don't even have the proper running shoes that we have today. Like, these are all things that he kind of brings up that kind of bring up the point that we are born to run, and that running 100 and 150 miles at a time, that's something insane. And actually, that reminded me of the scene from Forrest Gump, where Forrest Gump just decides to go out and run, and he runs and he runs and he runs forever. And that also kind of can connect to this idea that humans are born to run and do have the capability to run hundreds of miles at a time without any injury, and that these Tarahumara Indians, this clan of people, are able to go forever and ever without having any issues, without suffering running injuries, without having to do proper like stretching. And sure, they probably have good nutrition, but not the same as today. I think their diet consists mostly of corn and maize, and that is something totally different from what we do. So that kind of shows that people across the world with different backgrounds, different ways of living, are able to complete these feats of running very long distances at a time. So next I want to look up the part where he discusses the part about how women began running the marathon. And before that, there was all this talk from medical professionals saying that women would not be able to run because it would cause them physical pain. So let's take a look at that clip.
Women have been in the Olympics for quite some time now. But one thing is remarkable about all women sprinters. They all suck. They're terrible. There's not a fast woman on the planet, and there never has been. The fastest woman to ever run a mile did it in 4:15. I could throw a rock and hit a high school boy who can run faster in 4:15. For some reason, you guys are just really slow. But you get to the marathon we were just talking about. You guys have only been allowed to run the marathon for 20 years, because prior to the 1980s, medical science said that if a woman tried to run 26 miles, does anyone know what would happen if you tried to run 26 miles? Why you were banned from the marathon before the 1980s? What's that?
Her uterus would be torn.
Her uterus would be torn, yes. You would have torn reproductive organs. Uterus would fall out, literally fall out of the body. Now, I've been to a lot of marathons, and I've yet to see any. So it's only been 20 years that women have been allowed to run the marathon. And in that very short learning curve, you guys have been gone from, broken organs up to the fact that you're only 10 minutes off the male world record. Then you go beyond 26 miles into the distance that medical science also told us would be fatal to humans. Remember, Phidippides died when he ran 26 miles. You get to 50 and 100 miles, and suddenly it's a different game. You can take a runner like Ann Trayson or Nikki Kimball or Jen Shelton, you put them in a race of 50 or 100 miles against anybody in the world, and it's a coin toss who's going to win. I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, Emily Bear signed up for a race called the Hard Rock 100, which tells you all you need to know about the race. They give you 48 hours to finish this race. Well, Emily Bear, 500 runners, she finishes in 8th place in the top 10, even though she stopped at all the aid stations to breastfeed her baby during the race, and yet beat 492 other people. The last mystery. So why is it that women get stronger as distances get longer?
Okay, so he also brings up the point that like women originally was like, oh no, you can't run, you're gonna tear your uterus, and that ended up not being true, and that women were able to run marathons. And not only were they able to run marathons, they were able to run ultra marathons, like 100-mile runs that they can complete in a certain amount of time. So this woman did it in under 48 hours. So that kind of adds to his idea that yes, maybe we are born to run. That is something that we are able to do, and that medical professionals may not think that today, or may not have thought that in the past. But today, people are accomplishing these feats, and they're able to go out and do these crazy things. And so that adds to the idea that humans, in fact, are born to run. And again, by adding this extra example of real life and a real life event, it kind of makes it easier for his audience to believe him and believe his argument that humans are meant to run. And so again, like I was saying before, this kind of adds to his credibility, and that it adds the fact that it was like the Hard Rock 100. It's a race that people know about. That kind of adds to the audience's ability to understand what he's explaining, and makes it easier for them to believe his argument. I want to look at the part where he brings up the fact that the running injury is something that is new to our time, that people who ran in the past didn't have those injuries. So let's look at what he has to say about that.
Okay. we try to cash in on it, right? We try to can it and package it and make it better and sell it to people. And what happened was we started creating these fancy cushioned things which can make running better called running shoes. The reason I get personally pissed off about running shoes is because I bought 1 million of them and I kept getting hurt. And I think if anybody in here runs, and I just had a conversation with Carol, we talked for 2 minutes backstage, and she's talking about plantar fasciitis. You talk to a runner, I guarantee within 30 seconds, the conversation turns to injury. So if humans evolved as runners, if that's our one natural advantage, then why are we so bad at it? Why do we keep getting hurt? Curious thing about running and running injuries is that the running injury is new to our time. If you read folklore and mythology, any kind of myths, any kind of tall tales, running is always associated with freedom and vitality and youthfulness and eternal vigor. It's only in our lifetime that running has become associated with fear and pain. Geronimo used to say that my only friends are my legs, I only trust my legs. That's because an Apache triathlon used to be you would run 50 miles across the desert, engage in hand-to-hand combat, steal a bunch of horses, and slap leather for home. Geronimo was never saying, oh, you know something, my Achilles, I'm tapering, I got to take this week off, or I need to cross train, and I didn't do yoga, I'm not ready. You know? Humans ran and ran all the time. We are here today. We have our digital technology. All of our science comes from the fact that our ancestors were able to do something extraordinary every day, which is just rely on their naked feet and legs to run long distances.
I think that's a good point that he makes, that people in the past ran these crazy long distances without anything. Like he said, without cross-training, without yoga, without running shoes. Today, everyone has running shoes, and I can relate to this personally because I ran cross-country and track in high school, and that I was constantly buying new running shoes, trying to break them in, trying to avoid injury. But like he said, running injuries today are so common. Even I suffered a running injury. I suffered from a stress fracture in my foot, and so it kind of took me out for the season. I had to do a lot of cross-training, a lot of yoga, but this is something that he brings up that wasn't a problem in the past, that people didn't have these running ailments, and that like he suggests, it could be a cause of these new running shoes that people are becoming reliant on for everything, or becoming reliant on for running. And so maybe by taking these away, we can go back to how we were in the past, and that how we were born, we didn't have any running shoes in the past. So maybe if we don't have them now, we won't have any injuries like we did in the past. So again, that is another example of logos and the fact that he's using a real life example, or using a example that is logical and that makes sense, and so that his audience again will believe his argument that humans were in fact born to run. Okay, so that's going to be pretty much all of the parts that I'm going to be examining today of this video. And so overall, I think that the speaker made a good use of different examples from both the past and from today to support his argument that humans were in fact born to run. And so I believe that his video overall was very effective. I think one more thing I want to add before I finish up is the use of his attire and establishing a relationship with his audience. And so he's wearing kind of like this loose, laid back white t-shirt. His collar is kind of a little bit unbuttoned. He has sleeves rolled. This makes him seem more casual, and by looking more casual, the audience will be able to connect more with him, not see him as somebody who believes that he's better than them, someone who's a professional that can't believe him, but instead as someone who is reliable, someone who they could trust, someone who they can believe when they are speaking. And so that is the last thing I wanted to say about that. And so again, that adds to his credibility and his argument, and that people will believe him, and that he does, through the use of his examples and through like his casual attire, he is able to convince his audience that humans were born to run, and that is something that came in its inner nature. And so yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, thank you.